morning and welcome to ELOSOFUMARTAKES. This is our 158th take, live from the Alec Bradley Lone Star Studios of Euless, Texas. I'm your host, Barry Duplessis, as always, and I'm so proud, so pleased, and so privileged to be with you all tonight. This is going to be a fantastic show, a show 158 takes in the making. Long overdue, but so pleased to have this gentleman that will be joining us in just a moment. But before we get to formal introductions, we do have to thank the people that make this show possible, and that, of course, is our sponsors. And tonight's show is sponsored by Drew Estate. Drew Estate announced recently the new shelf-friendly boxes for undercrown sizes. The new box design looks almost identical to the award-winning current design, and the boxes continue to contain 25 cigars. The major difference and improvement lies in the shelf-friendly, more compact format, which enables premium cigar retailers to stock more boxes of your favorite undercrown cigars. The new boxes will roll out for all undercrown lines, including Maduro, Shade, and Sungrown, while the boxes for the Flying Pig, Tubo, and Corona Pequeña will remain unchanged. Additionally, the UPC codes for all undercrown boxes and single cigars will be unaffected. So, if you like undercrown cigars, stock them up today for your own personal humidor, because now you can fit even more inside your humidor thanks to the folks at Drew Estate. Tonight's show is also sponsored by Oveja Negra Brands, 4 unique companies who share a passion to provide innovative cigars for the next generation of cigar enthusiasts. Black Label Trading Company, Blackwork Studio, Dissonant, and Emilio are combining premium tobacco with an artisanal touch. Oveja Negra, where art and tobacco collide. Join the flock. Visit ovejanegracigars.com to learn more. And welcome, everybody. This is our 158th take, and it is my pleasure, my privilege, to introduce tonight's guest, sponsored by United Cigars. Smoke one today and start living united, Mr. Justo Eiroa of JRE Tobacco. Justo, how are we doing tonight?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. It's actually my honor to be with you guys tonight, and thank you so much, Bear, for considering us for tonight.
Justo, believe me, this is my pleasure. This is my honor. I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. I had the privilege of interviewing in a very brief interview at Michael's Tobacco, of course, a couple years ago. And I think we spent like 15 minutes on camera, but probably an hour together that night altogether. And I learned so much in that small amount of time. I can't wait for tonight just to learn more and to pick your brain a little bit more and to understand the legacy and the impact that your family and the cigars that you make and the tobacco that you grow does for our industry.
Well, I appreciate it so much, and like I said, for me it's a true privilege being with you guys tonight. And that time in the humidor was great. I was pretty new to interviews, and I was a little rusty. But as you go to and visit more shops and you talk to more people, you get a little bit more comfortable, and speaking a little bit more. So hopefully it should go smooth tonight.
Oh, absolutely. Speaking of humidors and obviously cigars and everything, we got a couple cigars here. I'm about to light up the Aladino Cameroon, it's the Super Toro. What did you decide to light up first tonight?
Well, actually, I also went with a Cameroon, but I'm doing a Robusto. Like I was saying before the show, what I get in samples of Robusto. So that's what I got to work with. So you guys get better sizes, but I'll start building up my humidor now at home with more variety of sizes.
So a while back, I was listening to an interview that you did, where you were talking about how much you really actually love the Lancero format. Now that's obviously a format that it creates a lot of buzz and controversy, because cigar nerds like me and the aficionados love it. Retailers, not so much, because it doesn't sell typically. But you're a Lancero fan.
Well, we're a Lancero fan, and actually our Lancero does extremely well. Today our portfolio carries 2 Lanceros, which is the regular Corojo and our Maduro with San Andres wrapper. And Jay Davis at Blue Smoke, we'll be coming out with, he's one of our partner stores that visit the farm. And for his 10th anniversary, we made a special order of, I think, about 120 boxes of the new Lancero in a Cameroon wrapper, which is a phenomenal and fantastic cigar. I just had Lonnie David from Colorado sent me a box for him to sign it that he purchased from Blue Smoke. And, a lot of people are asking me, hey, so the only thing you got to do is got to go to Jay Davis, Blue Smoke of Dallas, in order him there. So he's gotten since November. And so that's going to be our third Lancero wrapper. And sometime also by TPE, we should also be launching the Aladino vintage Lancero too. So you'll have a Habano wrapper, you'll
Oh,
have a
wow.
wrapper, a San Andres wrapper, and a Corojo True Puro. So our Lancero line is expanding to have four options, and I think it's going to be pretty good for the Aladino line. We do really well with the Lanceros, and they retail for about $8. So it's you can't beat that. It's probably one of the best construction that you'll see in the Lancero in the industry, and price wise, we try to keep it very, very, very accessible to all the consumers.
You definitely have one of the more approachable Lancero formats because you can typically see, I mean, the typical price for a Lancero, almost any Lancero on the market is about 10, 12 bucks. Again, depending on where you are geographically, depending on taxes and stuff like that. But I'm, at $8, $7, $8. I mean, it's definitely one of the more approachable Lanceros. And as we're going to get into tonight, the tobacco is phenomenal. So of course the smoke is great. But something else your family was known for back in the day, this is something that I've found really interesting. As many of my audience knows, I partner with Cigar Coop for Cigar Coop Primetime Special Edition, and we had our Candela episode this past Tuesday. And I was excited to learn for two reasons, because I have a story behind it, but I was excited to learn that the Eiroa family played a prominent part in American market selection, also known as Candela wrapper, back in the 70s and 80s, as far back as the 60s. I mean, so Justo, I mean, talk about a little bit about the impact that your family had on the mysterious Candela wrapper, or it wasn't so mysterious back then. It is now today a little bit more mysterious.
Well, yeah, Candela back in the '80s was probably the predominant wrapper that was being sold, but everything was made in machine made cigars. And actually, back I would say late '80s, we were probably growing like 500,000 pounds a year, and everything with all the crops were sold. Consolidated Cigar, I think, was probably the biggest customer that we had. And with the U.S. Tobacco, we teamed up, and we actually had the first bovine operation of cutting the wrapper and putting on a bovine, and then being shipped to House of Windsor for them to later put in the machines and put on the Candela wrapper. That's actually when my dad started using, late '70s, early '80s, the big machines, the rolling machines, so you could put on the humidity. That's where we actually first started using them, because the amount of tobacco we were processing to cut and put the wrappers on the bovines was just huge amounts of products. And the factory actually ran probably 24/7, making bovines with the Candela wrappers. So it was, and I was very young. I still remember the guys coming from, I think it was from Holland or the Netherlands, and they were putting all brand new machines. I think they were probably like 18 or 20, or I don't remember how many, probably easily 20 or plus machines doing bovines. So it was a very interesting operation way back then. But the Candela unfortunately has died down. But I guess it's, times change. But you know what? We'll hopefully surprise everyone coming out with a Candela soon.
Well, that's exciting to hear, because I mean, I was going to ask simply about that because of the historical impact that your family had on Candela, if that was something that you guys would be considering, approaching at some time in the future.
Well, I during the last couple crops, since I've been, always with my dad, I was able to go down in January and be with him for about a week. I said, hey, we got a crop coming up. Let's try a little bit of Candela, and he actually burned probably maybe about 1/8 of a house, because you have to put what you do with the Candela what the reason that candela is green is because during 48 hours, what you try to do is fixate the color of the chlorophyll in the leaf. And while normal tobacco will stay in the barn between 40 and 45 days, losing the chlorophyll and turning brown. And we're doing the reverse. So, it requires a lot of heat, but also requires a combination of a little bit of humidity so you don't overcrack it. So it's tricky, but it's a 48-hour process, 48 to 70-hour process.
That's wow. I mean, that's something that I think that a lot of people don't realize how, because they think that I heard this really ignorant comment one time when I was in a cigar shop about how that candela was like the lazy way out, and I was like, I don't think that's right. I'm pretty sure I mean, not, I mean, necessarily more challenging, but certainly challenging in itself, because it have to maintain its color. And I have something to show here in a second to kind of refer how difficult this is. But I mean, it's a very difficult process.
Not only does it require knowledge, but also the maintaining the color requires also uh, you know maintaining it in cool storage, because then the last thing you want to do is get the candela to darken itself and lose the properties that you fixated at once. So it's very important to take care of the tobacco after you make it into a candela. So it has to go into refrigeration. So it's also very expensive to do that. And nothing in tobacco is easy, because before you get harvested, you already went easily over 100 days into a crop. So there's no easy way out. It's just a shorter process because you're not aging the tobacco. But you still have to go through the whole crop, and pray that you get enough rain, but not so much rain, and you get nice warm weather and you don't get cool weather, and then that everybody shows up to work, and then you don't have excess winds, and that you don't have a plague or you don't have the blue mold. So getting a crop out there just to get the candela, it still takes all the same risks.
So I want to bring out a little bit of an artifact. And this was something that I've talked about on previous shows. So on my honeymoon, which is now almost 11 years ago to the day, and because my anniversary is next month, my wife and I had our honeymoon in San Antonio, Texas. Now I didn't go into like Fink's or Club Humidor or any of the big stores down there. This was a small little shop off the Riverwalk and everything. And I found something really interesting that in the time in my smoking career, again, we just talked about the significance of candela in your family and everything, Justo. But at the time, I just was like bizarre. Like I was like, I didn't think that this even existed. And I came across a Camacho Corojo Monarca candela, and here it is.
Beautiful. That is a pretty sight. That is one pretty sight.
And there's the date on it. March 2010 is when I purchased it. And I don't know how old it was at the time. The color was obviously a lot more vibrant, but the green is still there. I mean, the light on the cameras, the green is still there. This is not brown. This cigar, because the label is brown.
Yes.
The cigar is definitely green. I mean, that is unbelievable that after all this time that tobacco has kept that color. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, remember that I told you go through a process of fixating the color by actually burning. Remember, chlorophyll is what is what makes photosynthesis. Remember, we study biology, and we're telling us that the chlorophyll is the one that transforms the energy, the sunlight into so the plant can survive, and that's how it feeds itself. So that chlorophyll, you actually fixate it and by heat, and it just stays there. So you basically kind of like you're doing a brick in a way. So that cell is being petrified with the color. So that's to give it a kind of a more understanding of how you do that.
I mean, it's very impressive. And you told me the amount. So you guys we're talking the world here. We're not talking like for a particular market. In the 80s, the Eiroa family did more candela tobacco than anyone else in the world.
I would assume so as a private company. I don't know if there were, particular states that did it, like, but that's from what I know of. We basically supplied about 500,000 pounds a year for a
Wow.
while.
That's a lot. And I'm sure that was a fraction of the tobacco that you're producing for, I guess more traditional cigars, right?
Oh, remember, and back then when we were growing that, we weren't really a big cigar manufacturer. I don't think we actually started going into cigars until in the 80s. So Candela was before. We've always been a farmer before a cigar manufacturer, and we consider ourselves a grower that also makes cigars.
Right.
So we consider ourselves, a lot of people consider themselves, cigar manufacturers. We consider ourselves growers that manufacture cigars.
And that's a perfect segue into tonight's major point, Justo, which our major point is always brought to you by Barracoa Cigars. Barracoa Cigar Company is back. Get ready for the relaunch of the Voyage this spring. I personally can't wait for the cigar to come back. It's been over 3 years, but now with the revamped blend coming from one of the industry's hottest factories, Danny Vasquez promises if you like the original blend, you're certainly going to love the relaunch. So stay tuned for more details for how you can enjoy the Voyage. And remember, never settle. Barracoa Cigar Company. So that kind of leads us into tonight's major point. And I wanted, it was, we were kind of talking about before the show started, Justo. I'm not really big into on this particular show. Listen, I can nerd out with the best of them on wrapper, binder, filler. I love that stuff. I typically don't go down that route with this particular show. But one of the things that I think we have to do, and I'm more than pleased to, because it's so centric into the Eiroa DNA, is tobacco in itself. It is. You guys are, like you said, you guys are farmers first, cigar makers second, and it's been part of part of your lineage going back. How many generations? Was it your great grandfather that started this, or even further back?
Well, I said my it would be my grandfather. My dad's dad was which he worked for the Cuban Land Company in Cuba, and he had a farm and where we grew tobacco and sold it to brokers, and but we weren't, he wasn't doing much. My dad was going to school. We had there were three siblings from my grandfather, and they were going to college. Then the Cuban Revolution came, but they weren't a big grower. The big growers, whatever tobacco we grew in Cuba was being sold to Tampa, because everything Tampa was the capital of cigar world, and it's still Tampa. That's why it's really known for cigars. Ybor City.
And your family sold to some pretty significant, makers back in the day. I mean, like we're talking House of Windsor. You mentioned them already. A couple of others as well.
The whole list here. So just to give you, so I had to do a little bit of research. So I had to send that to somebody that wrote an article. But I'll give you just a perfect.
Well, while you're looking that up, I was curious because they've been around for so long, and of course, your family's been growing tobacco for so long. Do you happen to know if you ever supplied J.C. Newman by chance?
No, let me. I'm not sure. Uh,
It was just a shot in the dark because I just, the histories kind of parallel each other, obviously, and I just wanted to ask if you knew offhand.
well, basically, our biggest clients were probably was Bello Cigars, House of Windsor, Perfecto Garcia, Corral Guadisca, and then others. So maybe within the others, we probably sold them, but I cannot affirm that. I would have to ask, the Newman family if they did buy stuff from us. Yeah. So, but Bello Cigars was probably one of the biggest ones. So House of Windsor was the second one, and we did a lot of business with them. Yeah.
Yeah, House of Windsor is like that's if you look back at tobacco history, like cigar history, especially Ybor City and stuff, and they're a name that pops up quite a bit when you're kind of reading about it. So that's pretty phenomenal that your family's been a part of that. Um, so fast forward past the Cuban Revolution, your father settles in uh, Honduras, and then the cult starts cultivating different tobaccos, everything, and then obviously the authentic Corojo comes about. Now, When I started smoking cigars and I really started digging into the types of leaves that I enjoyed, I remember Corojo standing out to me because I love the pepper, I love the spice. It was very flavorful, but it also wasn't very aggressive. It wasn't a very formidable tobacco at the time for me, and so I really enjoyed it. But remember what I was smoking wasn't authentic Corojo. So for that is the JRE tagline. Talk about why JRE has that authentic Corojo and how it differs specifically from other Corojos on the market.
Well, one of the reasons, and I'll give you a little background story about the Corojo. The Corojo was grown by the Rodriguez family in Cuba, and then when my father was able to get the Camacho brand, we were able to get the seed from the Rodriguez family back in the 90s, and we started growing the Corojo. We were able to do it, in a proper way, and we're able to, uh, you know, aged it properly. And Corojo's got a very distinctive characteristic that it's very rich in flavor. As you know, will give you that peppery light up, but it also has a natural sweetness. It's got the woody, it's got the earth, and Corojo is very, very special. It's and the way Camacho succeeded was because of all that flavor configuration of that, and then my brother very smartly started coming out with bolder cigars, and there was a trend, and I would say he was probably one of the dynamic, uh, one of the most dynamic innovators during the industry back in the days of the Camacho heydays, and they even tried to register the Corojo, but they weren't allowed it because it was a region. So and then we also had the crisis of the blue mold crops that came all over Central America and Cuba, where basically a lot of people that were using Corojo was wiped out. So one of the things that happened was in Cuba they started crossbreeding varieties, which get a flower from one plant and then a flower from another variety, and then you cross pollinate, and you started creating the different varieties of Corojos that are now, and people are calling it Corojo, but it's a hybrid. Like if you mix a Brahman and an Angus, you get the Brangus. So that's so that's where you're crossbreeding, and that's the same thing that happened in the tobacco. And the yield that came out of that was, Corojo 98 or 99, and all these different varieties were created through crosses, and they were very successful because they gave you the hybrid ability to produce a little bit more. They gave you some of the characteristics of the Corojo, but they don't have the intensity that the original authentic Corojo has. Corojo plants are small, very low yielding and extremely susceptible to blue mold. So, when you have a crop that yields 40% less and is way more expensive to take care of, people, just rather not take the risk and go with an oil variety that is good, but does not give you the characteristics of the real Corojo, the authentic.
And so that's something that is very, very specific. Because one of the couple of the cigars I went back to, and I was like, was thinking about this when I was first kind of fell upon your brand and was hearing this authentic Corojo term and learning a little bit about your story and learning a little bit about the tobacco story. And I realized that yeah, when this Corojo that I fell in love with back in the day, that was what I was actually Corojo 98, Corojo 99, which was these hybridized leaves that you're talking about. So in fact, I wasn't smoking, and nothing to discredit these leaves. I mean, they're fantastic, right? But what?
Tobacco.
But it's just not Corojo. It's not the authentic Corojo.
It is called Corojo because they needed to find a substitute for that. Like and a lot of people say, hey, Connecticut, wrapper. It's not grown in Connecticut. It's mostly grown in Ecuador, so it's not Ecuador. But we'll talk about that later because there's a lot of as long as you get the genetics, it's going to work. And you'll see me doing a lot of examples that has to do with agriculture, especially with the cattle. But I know that people in Texas will agree with me because they can relate with cattle. So, like if you grow a Holstein in Honduras, or you grow it in Europe, it's still going to be a Holstein.
No, absolutely no. I think what's really interesting to me is that what I was learning about the way that you and your father grow this particular tobacco, because it's so susceptible to mold. Not only did you guys find a specific region that copies as best as possible from your day, from your family's days back in Cuba with the original Corojo seed, but you completely you completely kind of change the status quo because you don't follow the traditional season that most other growers grow because of the susceptibility to mold, right? You start earlier, is that right?
Actually, we're starting a little bit later because
Later.
sometimes normally we try to start in November, December, but we might start we might throw the seedlings, late November so we could transplant in January and get the crops out, or maybe or plant late because cold weather gets in Honduras between January and February. So we try to get away from the cold, and we might modify the way and the distances and the density of the plant. So we have to work, agronomically to adjust our crop to what we need to do to avoid having problems with the blue molds.
And, and another approach that your family took, and now this is a little non-traditional, right? Because you don't depend on regular rainfall. You actually have a very sophisticated drip irrigation system to ensure the quality of water, to ensure, to really kind of defend against that mold that it's so susceptible to, correct?
Oh, absolutely. If you were to do flood irrigation, where you basically, throw, let's say, instead of just to give you an idea, when you're do drip irrigation, you just barely basically put all the water and all nutrients that you feed through the system, right at the root system, and keeps the rest of the land dry, but enough water goes into the plant that it keeps the moisture levels lower on the field. While when you do the flood irrigation, basically the whole plantation is full of water, so it's more susceptible to blue mold because you have way more humidity, and you create a microclimate that allows the blue mold to actually uh, go on steroids.
Oh, wow. Okay. So to I've always been curious about this, and don't ask me why. I just, like I said, this is the episode. You are the person that I wanted to really nerd on about, like farming and the agricultural aspect of tobacco growing. But like, am I correct in understanding that, like, when mold just doesn't just affect the entire crop potentially, it can actually affect multiple generations, right? Because sometimes that fungus and everything kind of gets into the soil, and it can affect future generations of growing. Is that correct, or am I way off base?
A fungus is a spore, so whenever it's got the right ability, and whenever it's got the right conditions, humidity, and the proper temperature, it will grow. So if you don't rotate the crops or rotate the fields, you're going to be keep on. So that's one of the reasons we always rotate our fields with different crops. We might use corn or sorghum, and rotate the crop, so that way we completely break the cycle of having a solanase, which a solanase is tobacco, which is cousins with the tomato, believe it or not.
Hmm.
So we definitely need to break the cycle and clear the field by actually doing the crop rotation, and get rid of the whatever spores are there. But if you keep, and you also leave the land resting for about a year or maybe 2 years if you can, so that way the soil has not seen tobacco for a year or so. So you need to rest it, and that way you keep your fields a little bit way healthier.
And you have the land and the capabilities to do this, because correct me if I'm wrong, Justo, the Eiroa family actually controls an extensive portions of land there in Honduras,
Well,
And
it's
you,
not it's big for a tobacco farm. Infrastructure wise, I would say we're probably one of the most complete infrastructure farms in the industry. But we have about 440 acres of drip irrigation. A farm is about 600 acres, so it's a nice sized farm. But there's you got it's for a farm operation in one location. It's a great size. Yeah.
it's something like 20 plus curing barns, right?
We actually have 52 barns.
52. Okay, goodness gracious, I was way off. Excuse me.
And it's a pretty impressive. It's a pretty impressive operation, infrastructure wise.
And that's the other thing about, to go back to the leaf that we're talking about. Corojos typically, especially when you're talking about higher primings, because the Corona leaves are always smaller, but Corojo in itself, even with the larger, is typically a smaller leaf comparatively speaking to other leaves.
To Havana or Connecticut is way smaller, but we can get fairly decent sizes, but we only get 7 pairs or around 14 to 16 leaves versus you'll get 18 to 22 leaves in different varieties.
So I know you're familiar with this concept, and I know that this it might make you cringe, considering, again, because we were just talking about the low yields that comes from Corojo. Have you guys ever considered or experimented with stock cutting Corojo?
My dad did that a couple of times, but when you cut it and you let it regrow again, the taste, it becomes a little bit more bitter for some reason or another. And I would say I don't know exactly the situation, but it's not the same. And the yield also is not going to be that good because it's and then you're leaving the crop there from a normal cycle of 120 days, probably leave it another 60 or 70 days. So you're looking, it's not going to be the same. When you grow something from the beginning, from fresh, it will have more how do you call it, more strength and growing and bigger leaves, and taste definitely does change. So whatever he tried before, he did not like it, and you always try to take advantage of all the all the land preparations and everything. If you get a second crop by just cutting the stem and letting it regrow, some people may do that with other varieties. Now that there's, I guess we're in a miniature boom that because people are smoking more, and we'll hopefully at the end of the day end up with more smokers and people trying out cigars, and I think it's going to be good for the industry.
So there's two questions that I have within this context here, Justo, and they're both why questions. So I'll ask them together, and you can answer it however you want to. So why Corojo, and why Honduras?
Well, Honduras was remember, like I said, one of the things that happened when the Cuban embargo started. If you look at our bans, it'll have 1947 to 1961. So Cuba was basically one of the things that happened was all the tobacco that was being and it was called Havana Clear. And Havana Clear was developed as a trademark or certification of tobacco that was coming from Cuba, and was shipped to Tampa to all the factories that were where all the major cigar manufacturers were. And since we were selling tobacco to Tampa, my grandfather and brokers, and that's how my dad met a lot of his friends, and actually through his friends and his godfather, which is one of the Oliva family from the tobacco grower, which is Martin Oliva, which is Angel Oliva's, I believe, older brother, and Angel Oliva's father, John Oliva Sr. So we're a very close, tight family, and they actually are the ones that brought my dad to help him. Well, when the revolution started, all Cuban tobacco was basically stopped from raw materials getting into Tampa. So the Oliva family, Angel Oliva was a very ingenious gentleman, and he actually started growing tobacco up in Quincy. So my dad was one of the first guys and first group of Cuban technicians that went up to Quincy, Florida, and grew tobacco. And after they started developing the projects there, the cigar industry, you had such a large consumption, they needed to find more areas to grow. So most of Nicaragua opened the doors for a lot of the people to come down and establish operations. But Honduras already started in 1960, 1961 to have a pilot program that was developed there by the Honduran Agricultural Bank, which is what called now it's called Manadesa, but they had a bank that was creating a pilot program that was developed by Tino Argudin and Jorge Hueso Arias, which was cultivating in Santa Rosa de Copan. So Tino Argudin was establishing one of the pilot programs, and that pilot program was actually started on our farm in Hamastron. And then when that crop was ready, and after my dad had gone to the Korean War, and before that, Bay of Pigs, the Oliva family asked my dad to come on down and help them sort the leaves of that first pilot program. And there was a real need for tobacco in Tampa because of the embargo. But at the same time, when Angel Oliva went down there, he said, "Hey, this tobacco is phenomenal." So they started developing Honduras at the same time that they were developing Nicaragua. So and that's how my dad started getting into the business, and later became independent after working with the Olivas for a couple of years.
In this industry, Justo, I'm sure you're obviously very aware and keen on the trends that kind of come and go, in this industry. Some are long and some are short. The big gauge, boom, which your brother Christian was very much a part of with his partner there, Tom Lazuka at Asylum. The bolder, the bigger. You couldn't make cigars bold enough, for a while. The full court press kind of on full bodied cigars was kind of all the rage and things like that. Then you had the couple years where San Andreas was all the rage, and then companies started coming out with Connecticut's again. Trends are short, long and short. But I think one of the more interesting long-term trends is how popular countries are. Because we think right now the way that the industry kind of stands is that Nicaragua is this hotbed, right? It's like there's so many companies there. Like 15, 20 years ago, there weren't that many companies in Nicaragua. And what we forget, because sometimes we're so short-sighted, is that Honduras was the leading.
What's the beast?
What?
What's the beast? What's the biggest manufacturer of cigars, premium cigars in the world for a while? We held the title for a while. But Nicaragua has done a fantastic job, in making all the cigar manufacturers and investors that are opening up their doors. They're extremely competitive, salary wise, and they were also during the Nicaraguan Revolution. All the cigar growers and manufacturers who were there had to actually leave because of the Sandinistas. But now the Sandinistas have turned that policy around and have become very welcoming, and actually have developed and supported a great cigar manufacturing and cigar operations that have established themselves in Nicaragua with great success, and doing really high quality products. And I believe Honduras also has that same quality. We also we've been in the business for a long time, and we actually there's a small from our house, from our farm. Once you get the opportunity to come down with us, you can see that we're basically in the same valley. So the tobacco is going to be extremely similar, and Nicaragua's gotten a lot of press. All the major manufacturers have factories there, but Honduras also has major manufacturers in our place too. You got General, you got Altadis, you got Esencia. So we're all have a foot in each country. So but Honduras is I think labor wise it's a little bit more expensive.
that was actually something that I was very surprised to learn was the labor costs in Honduras are actually greater than in even its neighboring Nicaragua or even in the Dominican Republic in some cases. But
We're we're probably double Dominican Republic, and
my,
probably 4 or 5 times, a little bit more than. And salaries in Honduras go up about 3 to 5% every year, and probably our minimum salary is close to about $580 a month minimum salary, even though our rollers get paid how do you call it, by unit. So
mhm.
it's a little bit more expensive to work, even though there's a lot of competition in Nicaragua and prices are going up because of the high demand of manufacturing there. Still, they have a competitive advantage over us. And they're developing a great workforce too.
That really is interesting. Because when I first heard that, and I think it was you who said it in an interview that I was listening to about the labor costs. It was really interesting. So how, I mean, and I thought about this, and I tried to think about this, and I look at, you know, and you certainly have some value brands that kind of fall in lesser price category, more value price category, but then um, you also have some, the original Aladino, the Corojo Reserva, they get into the little bit more mid range at 12, 13, 15, 14, $15. Depending, again, this is all geographically based on in retail wise, but I mean, how do you keep your prices so competitive with these other countries when your labor is so high?
Well, even though labor plays a very important role in it, we also are a grower. So, there is a little bit of compensation, even though we have to, charge the factory the market price of our tobacco. But at the end of the day, we need also the system to, as we grow. One of the things that when we first started, if you look at it, even though we have a lot of, vitolas in the Corojo, maybe 5 or 6, we have 12, but maybe 50% is where, the real big volume is at, of the Corojo portfolio. And then if you look into our Maduro line, which was the second line that I came out with, I only have, I think is 4 or 5 sizes there, from a Corona all the way to the Toro.
Mhm.
And then in the Connecticut, I also have, I think is 4 sizes. And it's so I'm keeping everything to the SKUs that most people sell in volume. And and then we also have the Corojo Reserva that it's a very limited cigar, and you have to carry at least 9 facings to be able to have that. And and most stores get 3 to 4 boxes a month. That's how what we could supply. And like you said, our prices, we have, even we can have with a vintage today that's a Rothschild with $6 a stick, and a 50 box count. So we have cigars from all the way, from $6 to, like you said, 14. Even our patent, which is a $20 cigar, which is a size A, 48 by 9, which is a very beautiful size, individually packed in their own cedar box,
Oh,
and a
wow.
10. So, like I said, we have the whole range, but we're slowly bringing in. Even though my dad wants to come out with more and more and more SKUs, I gotta slow him down, because there's so much space. There's very limited amount of space in humidors, and also, we're still a young brand. We actually took over in 2016, even though we launched in 2015. But we're growing very steadily, and it's an organic growth. And we're getting a lot of great reviews, and we're solidly growing, and firm and fertile soil. And we're trying to do our best that we can to manage our pricing and our costs, and get the best pricing out there for our consumers.
Yeah, I think I just answered my own question when I was thinking about it, because you guys are vertically integrated. Um, because I mean, I know that you guys do basically all of JRE Tobacco's cigars are about 97% of the tobacco is yours, right? I mean, you outsource the Maduro, the Toronto, and then the Connecticut from
Yeah.
Ecuador,
Yeah, from Ecuador. Yeah.
and that's it.
Yeah, basically that's it. Yeah. And the reason is they do it better than us. And so, we just, we've been since the Camacho days, we buy it from the Torrens and, and from the Camacho days, we bought it from Ecuador. So we continue the same thing. So, you're not gonna, and that's one of the things we're always trying to focus and get my dad to focus. And now we're slowly experimenting with new varieties, and we're very successful with our Cameroon, which we're extremely happy with the results, and and I think that's something for a portfolio. Now we've been known for Corojo. Now we want to be known for Cameroon, and there's something more to come.
I want to touch on that here kind of in a second, but what I think is really awesome, and I've heard, I can't wait for hopefully the opportunity to meet him, because I've heard that at 83 years young, the iconic Julio Eiroa has more energy in his little finger than I think I have in most days. So I
More
mean,
most of the guys I know.
this is something that's kind of froth in the industry. You have these icons, these men and women who have been doing it for years, decades, and they're just not slowing down. There's just no stopping them. I mean, comparatively speaking to your father, I mean, do you kind of I mean, you share the DNA, but I mean, do you kind of share that drive? Is that within you too? Like, I mean, can you see yourself going into your 80s and your 90s, just, I mean, full
Well,
throttle like your dad has?
I honestly think myself, as I'm always going to work, and I also love the farm. Him and I. The thing is that his personality and my personality are pretty much the same, and that's why it took us a while to work together. And I think as I gotten older, I see he's way wiser than I am, and what keeps him alive is working on the farm. That's what keeps his youth. Not only that, the amount of impact that all cigar operations have in the communities by providing jobs, also stability, economic stability, and well-being for the communities. If you were to look at most of the cities where you have cigar manufacturing, is probably where the least employment, least crime, or best employment figures in the countries that are producing cigars are. So I think is very important for the amount of cigars. Even though the cigar industry is kind of small in the premium cigar industry, we're probably about 350 million cigars, ballpark figure. But we generate a lot of employment, and we create a lot of how do you call it, social benefit to all the communities that whether it's in Dominican Republic, Nicaragua, Honduras, or Ecuador. We're providing a way of life for a lot of people, and that's one of the major focuses of my father, and not only does he enjoy it, but there is also a social commitment to continue developing these communities and being part of that communities.
So talk a little bit about this, because this is something that you actually, I mean, with recent history, and I mean recent being this past year, has been extremely difficult for most companies. People have had to roll back the capacity at which their staffs, that they've had to change the way they manufacture and operate to adhere to guidelines and things like this. But this is something that, because of what we were talking about earlier, with the susceptibility to the tobacco that you hold dear, the being the Corojo leaf, you guys have had to take extraordinary measures to make sure that all facilities are sterile and things like that. So this really kind of puts you, I don't want to use advantage, that's so benign, but like you were kind of ahead of the curve on this, because you were almost prepared because of the way you guys have already been doing things. Am I right?
Well, in a way, I think we were probably being one of the models to as an example in the industry. We were never shut down. I mean, when they started checking factories and looking at protocols and how you were working, we were adapted very easily. I mean, our factories is small right now, anyways. We about 15, 18, between 15 and 20 pairs, so it's not a big facility. So we have the facility, enough facilities so we can spread them out. But a lot of factories might not have, the physical area to give space to, because normally teams work together. You have a buncher and you have a roller, and in some places, you had to, the physical space did not allow them to have that amount of teams, so close together. So a lot of people had to roll back on the amount of employees that they had until they started fixing new facilities to be able to continue manufacturing and have a safer environment for their employees. At the same time, as far as I can remember, 8 or 9 years ago, we always had a doctor and staff and nurse and staff. So you'll see our medical staff going in and taking temperatures 2 or 3 times a day and keep a log of all the employees' temperature. So there's protocols that we had to follow and we continue to follow, and we were able to adjust it very quickly, and and also help out and give some of the information to other manufacturers in the industries, but some also manufacturers in Nicaragua too. We're a close community. Anytime you could do a good to another company, it comes back. I believe in karma. You do good things happen to you.
No, absolutely. And so we've been talking a lot about tobacco and the way that you guys have manufactured and been doing business for years, and so this leads all to 2015 and 2016 when you guys launched the brand after your father's non-compete was over, after the sale of Camacho. And so you come out with three brands, Rancho Luno, Tarascan, and the iconic, even though it's a very young iconic, the iconic Aladino line, which has developed very well for you guys. Come out with the original Corojo, which I showed earlier when we were talking about the label from 1947 to 1961. Um, the 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 branding, which was really interesting to me when I remember when our good mutual friend Will Cooper was talking to me about this brand. I was kind of taken aback by the branding, because it seemed like, and I don't know if this is something you guys were going for, but the label and the classic look and even the name has this kind of you know old, I hate the term old school, I use it all the time, but it's so overused, but
I'm saying old school. I mean, it's very traditional, very, very traditional.
and it seemed like a brand that had been around for a long time, even though it hasn't been. That was the thing that kind of got me. I was just like, it almost seemed like, yeah, of course this is a staple. It's been around forever. And in reality, it's younger than some of,
Right.
it's
Actually, when you look at it, even though my brother launched it in 2015, we actually took it over in 2016. Until in 2016, I didn't have the El Corojo with us. So actually, this is actually our 5th year, and we're extremely happy because we have been uh, uh, growing, like I said, very organically and very strong, and it's been very successful. Texas has been very, 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 very good for us. I mean, I think Texas is probably one of the premier states for cigar smoking, and you have wonderful people, or consumers all over the country that are supporting our brand, and we're very happy. And like I said, we're trying to slowly introduce more lines every year, and now you'll see expansion of now the Habano vintage, and you'll see an expansion on the Cameroon Lancero, and we're slowly doing that. I'm also working, maybe in the future. I don't have a Gordo in Aladino, Connecticut, and I need a Gordo, so I'll be coming out with a Gordo, sooner than later.
Well, Will Cooper will be ecstatic to hear that, because he loves a good Gordo. So I'm the Lancero guy. He's the bigger gauge guy. We have that war that we wage.
I got number 2 cigar of the year, coming out of the gates with him with the Lancero.
Which was, yeah, which I always kind of go back to him when I'm arguing with him back and forth, and I was like, like, hey, just so you know, I don't know if you've looked at your historical record, but you're the Lancero made your number 2 cigar of the year list, just FYI. But I think, just to go back to Aladino itself. So the name is actually, if I've got my history right, it's actually there is a theater in the town there in Honduras it's either named Aladino or named Aladdin or something like that.
called Aladino. That was a theater, yeah. And but the way I look at Aladino, Aladino is actually Aladdin. Okay, so it's magic genie. And in the way I, I spin the way Aladino is that since you have 1947 and 1961, when you smoke an Aladino, it's actually bringing you back to that era. So Aladino, the genie, brings you when you're smoking this to the most Cubanistic cigar that is out there in the industry today because of our Corojo. So that's how I picture Aladino, and that's the way I kind of want to describe Aladino. So if you want to go back to the golden era of Cuban cigars, you smoke an Aladino because that's what Aladino brings you back to.
And I think that I think that that is I think that's one of the misconceptions about, like, when people talk about smoking Habanos or smoking Cuban cigars today in 2021, right? Or even 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 2015, 2016, you know, the Cuban cigar today is not what the Cuban cigar was in this time period that we're talking about. And it's to your father's recollection, what you guys have recreated in the Aladino harkens back to that time period. So this is what the world was all a craze about, right? It's not the Cuban cigar today. This is what people were nuts about.
If you were to smoke Cuban cigars today, I would say one of the things that you'll find they're not going to be as strong or bold as what you have in the U.S. market. I would say the U.S. market is probably the one that's got probably the best cigars in the industry today. I mean, when you look at Europe, I think they're more mild to medium smokers than the U.S. market is. And around the world, most people that don't have a cigar culture, or may smoke one or two cigars a week, are not going to smoke a super bold cigar. While here in the U.S., bolder, more fuller cigars are the ones that are taking, have a lot of there's a lot of market. Don't get me wrong, still Connecticut is probably still the best selling wrapper in the U.S. And Connecticut outsells everything because since they're tend to be milder, people will tend to smoke more of that cigar than a bolder cigar. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I perceive, and that's what I see in the market.
No, absolutely true. And I think that's, I'm probably going to write it up next because we've been talking about it so much. But what we are smoking right now, Justo, is the Aladino Cameroon, which was this, along with the Habano Vintage, is your most recent release. And I've I want to give you a lot of credit for something, because this is something that is very is a trend in the industry, which kind of catches some flack, which is the use of, when people say, like the term Habano. Well, there's a lot of different types of Habano. There's Nicaraguan Habano, there's Ecuadorian Habano, there's Honduran Habano, there's, you name it, right? Um, even, when there's, Maduro is such a, it's such a generic term. Well, what kind of Maduro are you talking about? Even the term Connecticut, right? You know, this isn't Connecticut. This is Ecuadorian Connecticut, right? Or Ecuadorian shade, however you want to characterize it. But you guys don't hide from that. You embrace the fact that you're this is different. This isn't Cameroon from Africa. This is Cameroon that you and your father developed. I mean, is it, to your knowledge? Because I couldn't find anything. Is it, to your knowledge, the first Cameroon developed in Honduras?
No, my dad way back in the in the 90s, and we experimented a little bit with the Cameroon, and we have a big cigar broker that gave us the seed a couple years back, and we started with 2 acres and with 5 acres, and now we're doing 50, 60 acres because we were very successful in doing that. And you remember what I explained about cattle. If you get a Brahman and you get the cattle born in Brazil, you grow it in Texas, or you have it bred in Honduras, it's going to be a Brahman. Okay, so and if you get a Holstein, it's going to be a Holstein here in the United States. It's going to be a Holstein in England. It's going to be a Holstein in Honduras. So it's if you get the genetic material and you're able to provide if you have the great conditions to be able to grow it, you're going to be able to get the characteristics of that of that variety to come out in your cigars. And you could taste the flavor, and you could definitely taste the flavor. This is the Cameroon has become probably one of my favorite cigars. Like I said, I'm a mild to medium smoker. I'll smoke a little bit bolder, but I have to have dinner. If not, I'll lightheaded. And, and there's no shame in saying that. My dad doesn't. I give him a Reserva, and he turns around in a scooter and just runs away from me because he doesn't like to smoke bolder cigars either. He doesn't like to do that. And like I said, the favorite cigar, like I told you before, is the one that you like, or the one the consumer likes. That's the best cigar for that particular smoker.
Right.
So, and one of the things that we have tried to blend, and our Corojo is our base, and we like to use that a lot in our fillers and binders and stuff like that, because you could get a lot of flavor, and and bring tons of flavor to a cigar without having to knock you out. So a mild to medium smoker can really enjoy a cigar, and very clean, and no aftertaste, no ammonia to it. And a lot of people confuse strength with bitterness. And our cigars, what gives you is a lot of aroma. So like I said, a mild to medium can enjoy it, but also a medium plus guy can smoke a regular Corojo or a regular line that you have there, and they'll get tons of flavor. So they could probably be very happy with one of our cigars. And if they really want to take it to the next level, we also have the Reserva. You know, and I believe it or not, I'm also a lover of Habano, and now you'll see in our Habano line will start to expand. So we're very happy with what we're doing.
Two comments. I want to talk about the Corojo Reserva in a moment, because I have a story about that I found interesting, and I wanted to get your take on it. But to talk about the Cameroon for just one more second, what I've noticed about the Aladino Cameroon versus other Cameroon, and I'm a big fan of the leaf in general. Like I like its nuttiness. It has a richness to it that really, depending on the blend, really kind of adds this dimension that's it's very specific, and it's very spot on. And this isn't a knock against genuine African Cameroon, because again, I think it's just the way that it's cultivated, and it just happens to be the byproduct of it. But that it's a very delicate but yet flavorful leaf, and delicate being the key term. Like if you drop a cigar that has Cameroon wrapper on it, I mean, you better hope and pray, otherwise it can crack all over the place. That is something I noticed very, very quickly about the Aladino Cameroon. Now, the tobacco is not dense like a broadleaf dense. Like, it's not that kind of,
No, it's not.
that's not that thick, but
no.
it does have some density to it.
Well, and that all has to do with the nutrition. If you get a little kid and you just don't give them milk or vitamins, you'll be short like me. But if you get a kid and you give him all the vitamins, he drinks milk and gets all everything, he's gonna grow into a big boy. And that's the same thing what you do with a plant and a leaf. If that tobacco is going to have all the nutrients, and you treat it with a lot of care and a lot of nutritional and everything, that tobacco is going to grow with all the potential that his genetic code has to make it, to give you all the flavors and all the natural characteristics that has. So it's very important on how to grow tobacco, and you have to definitely know what you're doing. And like I said, I think we're professional growers of leaf, and that's my hats off to my dad, and that's something that I strongly believe in. Him and I, during the Camacho days, I was always there with him. I'm the one that was in charge of all the mechanization, working with the programs, and also crop rotations. So it all has to do with how much input you put into your raw materials, and how well, if, like you said, if you got a great cut of beef from a good from a good cattle, you're going to be able to get a great steak. But if you got an older an older bull, 10 12 years old, it's not going to be as tender as a young 18-month or 2-year-old bull.
No, absolutely. I'm just amazed by, every time I smoke an Aladino, from the Maduro to the original to this Cameroon to the original Corojo Reserva, I think it's really, it really is incredible how much flavor comes out of a, like we were talking about, a mild to medium bodied cigar. And I think obtrusive, like it doesn't knock you in the face. It doesn't knock you down, with the exception of the Corojo Reserva, which I have a story about. But these other lines, they just have, but there's so much flavor. They keep your attention. And even as I'm having this great conversation with you, Justo, like I keep going back to the cigar and I'm just like, wow, like I'm almost finished with it. And this is the time that the cigar starts to get a little hot, typically, right? We'll start to get a little hot because, I mean, it's just natural, it's physics. But what I notice about the Aladino is it doesn't happen. Like there's not this, bitterness that kind of comes in naturally at the end. I mean, these when you talk about the metaphor of like smoking your fingertips off, right? You've heard that term when you're smoking a cigar. That's consistent with your product.
And that's when you have very well aged tobacco, and you take the time to take all the ammonia out. What gives you the bitterness is younger tobacco and also ammonia. Ammonia plays a very important role, and that's why I always tell you, don't confuse bitterness with strength, because you could get a cigar and it will pop you because it's a younger tobacco. And don't get me wrong, some people are used to younger tobacco, and they might like a little bit, but we go the opposite way. The way we have designed, or have uh, looked into blending our cigars, to give you that intensity of flavor that we want to give you, but at the same time we want to give you that intensity of flavor, and keep you always craving for more flavor all the time. So if I was to give you a fuller cigar, you'll get that, but I don't think people like to enjoy maybe having one or two or three cigars a day, rather than just one bold one. But that's just the way that my dad likes to blend.
I remember, so our mutual friend and my employer, Mike Peacock at Michael's Tobacco of Euless, he was telling me this story where he had gone down to Honduras. He was smoking a cigar with your father, with a couple of other retailers at the time, and someone lit a cigar. It was an Aladino and the original Corojo, and did a bad job of lighting it, right? Like it only lit like half the foot or something like that. And he realized it, and then he was about to reach for his lighter to touch it up, and your father very calmly, but very firmly said, "Don't touch your lighter." And Mike, as he tells the story to me, he was like, he was kind of he it kind of cut, and Mike's a very even keeled man, as you know, and
Oh,
he
very,
like,
very.
and it kind of caught his attention, like,
He
because you're,
he he was probably one of the crew in Apollo 13. Very cool. Very.
yes, exactly. And um and so they sat there, kind of quiet for a while, and this gentleman who kind of half lifted the foot smoked it down a little bit further and a little further, and the cigar naturally caught up to itself and executed this what Mike describes as this perfect burn, after a couple of inches into the cigar, after the man apparently just completely botched the lighting job. um I actually I experimented with this. I wanted to see it for myself, and I did it, and I'll be darned, who's so it it was it was
Believe
incredible. It was absolutely incredible.
Well, and this it's the way you construct the material, and also the way we try to do everything with top notch materials, and that's where I think I have to give all that credit to Julio, my dad, and he's a true professional, and he knows what he's doing, and the way we train our rollers is all about construction. You can almost see in every single cigar that you have, you'll end up with a cone in the middle of the cigar as the ash, as you knock off the ash, because everything is just done so so methodically and so much perfection. Every single one of our cigars is draw tested. We don't have that massive production that we're doing 70 or 80,000 cigars like we were doing in the Camacho days, because we're doing 10, 12, 15,000 cigars a day, so it's not a big deal. So we do draw test everything, and we're very on top of our guys. One of the things we do want to keep on doing is have consistency in the construction and quality of our cigars. And whether you're going to do a good cigar, or you're going to do an okay cigar, you better have that quality and consistency. So when the consumer, gets another cigars, they know what they're getting for. When you buy a Coca-Cola, you're going to be tasting the Coca-Cola, or so you're always looking at consistency all the time.
Absolutely. I think it's just absolutely incredible, the quality that we're talking about here. And I also think nothing ever falls short of amazing me in this industry. To think that 10 to 12,000 cigars a day is small potatoes, comparatively speaking, still blows my mind. Still blows my mind.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of work. Believe me, it takes a lot of people to support that. And then there are some factories out there that are doing over 100,000 cigars a day, which
Right.
is
Just,
really, mind-boggling. I modular doing 70, 80,000 cigars. I said, wow, that's huge. And but we're happy with what we're doing. We're slowly growing, and the idea is maybe cap it once we reach a number that I think that is sustainable, and that's what we look for. We never want to go back to the to those huge numbers. It's a lot of stress in the supply chain. There's a lot of boxes, there's a lot of tobacco, there's a lot of personnel, and if you keep an operation that is manageable, and my dad, even though he's got all the energy in the world, 83, running, he doesn't. I don't want him to be running 300 pairs of people, just 600 rollers in the room, just too much. Plus, his passion is the farm.
Absolutely. So the story I wanted to tell about with the Corojo Reserva was, I really loved it when it was originally released, and I put a few back because I'm a big aging cigar nerd, as my audience knows, and I put a few back. And I remember visiting I took care of my mother for a few days after she had a surgery. This was a little over a year and a half ago, and I remember taking, or maybe a year ago, excuse me, and I took one of those Corojo Reservas with me along with some other cigars. And one night I went onto my back patio, and I lit that cigar up, and I just remember, that cigar was a year old, and I just got smacked in the face. It was my first cigar of the day, and I still remember just how strong that cigar was. And I was like, I just didn't remember that this cigar being that strong. And I was like, a year of age, this should have mellowed a bit, but it had, I think it almost had more pop than when I first smoked it off the shelf. I mean, is that even humanly possible?
Well, one of the things you're doing, you just taking out, higher primings, and the higher you go, the more pop you'll get. They're a little bit thicker leaves. They'll burn a little bit slower too, since they're a little bit thicker. But the higher you go, the more intensity you get in flavor, and that's normal. That's why our reserve is so limited, because when you're looking at it, when you're growing, we're only using maybe 2 or 3 primings. We're only using probably about 16 or 18% of our tobaccos. Can be, if it's good enough, we'll make it to the reserva. We cannot always do that, so that's why we limit our reserva. And so that way we could always have inventory. And I rather have once a month we supply whatever the stores need, but we try to keep enough for all the stores all the time.
Absolutely. Well, so this takes us into one of our fun segments, and I mentioned this to you before the show, and this is one of our, our audience's favorite segments, which is our One Must Go segment. And it's, as always, it's brought to you by United Cigars, featuring La Giana Havana and distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, Garofalo, and the highly acclaimed Atabey and Byron lines. So please smoke one today and start living united. Now, so this is the segment where I actually give you 3 things, and one has to go. And so I try to mold this typically after after my guest, and you have a very very fascinating background. So, you grew up in the tobacco industry. Obviously, that's what you're doing today. But you're a farmer by trade. You and your father are farmers. You've said it countless times, and you've said it several times tonight. But you also have sold things for a living, and you actually had your own water business, bottled water business. You also worked for Campbell's for a time as well. And obviously, you sell cigars for a living too. And so I wanted to ask this question in a very specific way. So basically, the one that has to go is the one that was the most difficult to sell. So this isn't like one's got to go, like you'll wipe it from your history or anything like that. We're not getting that extreme here, but like in your time and in the amount of time that you spend in all these industries and you talked once about your competitors in bottled water were like your Dasanis and your Aquafinas. I mean, you were up there. And so what was the hardest product, or what has been the hardest product to sell to the customer?
Well, I think honestly, probably I would say cigars is probably the toughest. I mean, when you're selling beverages, and beverages is, when you're looking at mass consumption, it's mass consumption. I mean, usually when everybody goes and buys water or something like that, you go to a supermarket and you'll buy 1 or 2 cases of water, and it's very easy to, you know, uh, every time I go to BJ's, I buy 5 or 6 cases. So, there's a high consumption of water. But cigars, I mean, there's a lot of great brands out there. There's most of the stores are, private individual businesses, and they require special attention. They require to know the product. And even though we have been in the industry, you're coming out with new brands. So, making yourself to be known and getting into humidors and getting the store managers or humidor managers to try the cigar, and also for them to get consumers that are already consuming something else, and being able to be in the rotation of somebody that is smoking 2 or 3 brands or one particular brand, and for them to try our cigar, it's a challenge. So I would say cigars is definitely one of those things that requires a lot of work, and it requires a lot of attention on our part. And in the more brands that are out there, you definitely need to identify yourself with not only the consumer but also with the managers, the humidors.
Mhm.
So, and it's something that they have a lot of weight in telling the consumer what to try. So we have to have a lot of detailed attention and follow up with within the industry with all the stores, because they're all individual businesses like we are, and their success is very important for us, because as they are successful, and the store becomes strong, but at the same time, we need to somehow be able to grow the clientele with them.
I had a hunch that you were probably going to choose this, because I was thinking about it in exactly the terms that you were talking about, because we were talking about 12,000 cigars a day. I mean, that in the terms of the beverage business, I mean, that was probably the production of an hour.
No, we had machines were doing 4 or 5 thousand bags, an hour. We had
Yeah.
like 7 of those, so it was, volume wise, it's just completely different. The business is completely different.
And Campbell's, for instance, that's a staple in every supermarket, in every in every cornerstone chain, everywhere. I mean, you can find Campbell's anywhere that food is sold. And
They also have Pepperidge Farm, and I think they also bought Kettle. I mean, the potato chips.
Kettle, yeah, Kettle brand, yeah.
So it's they're a household name. They're one of the oldest companies in the U.S. I think it was the first company that actually came out with canned food, and they got a bunch of awards and stuff like that because they were the innovators back in the industry. So it's a different. Cigars is something that you may consider a luxury item, because it's something that you don't need to survive, but and that's why it's a little bit harder. And selling water, soup, and stuff like that is way easier, even though there's a lot of competition and everything.
So this was something I couldn't find, Justo. What was the brand of water that you owned? What was the name?
We own Aqua Springs.
Okay. And
Okay.
then, and you're not vested in that company anymore.
No, 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 no. We sold it off in I think it was 2007. 2007.
you know, so, speaking of history, and that was our One Must Go segment. As always, it's brought to you by United Cigars. Smoke one today, start living united, featuring La Giana Havana, distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, Garofalo, and the highly acclaimed Atabey and Byron lines. So smoke one today and start living united. But we talked about historical significance. It's kind of funny that you worked for Campbell's, which was this titan of the food industry. You got into the water business, which is, certainly a growing, and you became very quickly a huge power player in that. Like you said, your major competitors were the Dasanis and the Aquafinas of the world. The Eiroa family, we've talked about the historical significance of your own family and what they've played. And but even more so, there's a lot of history in your own family with just by association, because like your father and yourself, you are alumni of Farragut High School, or the
Admiral
Farragut.
Farragut in
Yes,
Petersburg.
yes, in St. Petersburg. And there's some pretty famous alumni as well of that school, and also another school you attended, which was Tampa Jesuit. But your father's classmate and teammate on the baseball team was a man named Neil Armstrong.
Quite a gentleman, huh? Well, they weren't classmates. I think Neil Armstrong graduated in '53, and my dad graduated in '54.
Right. And they played on the same baseball team, though, right? I did hear that correct?
I believe so. Yes, yes,
Right.
yes,
And your father was the catcher?
yes. My dad played catcher. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, did he, did they, has he ever told you any stories about being classmates with him or anything like that? Or just, was it just
No,
like,
no. He just remembers him being in the baseball team. You know, my dad. The thing is, there was a group of young Cubans that always hung around together. So he was more waiting for the weekends to go dancing in Tampa. So they would pick him up and they would go dancing in Tampa with other families. So he was more about that. And usually you have a lot of people that you go to school with. I went to Jesuit for my freshman and sophomore year, and then I think I went fifth, sixth, seventh grade to Admiral Farragut, and then I finished off in Canada. So I was mostly in boarding school. So when I lived in and my dad took me out of Admiral Farragut to send me later to Canada, and then I went to Tampa Jesuit for my freshman and sophomore, and then my last junior and senior year, I graduated in Canada, high school in Lennoxville, Quebec.
oh my goodness. So you definitely went all over the place.
Believe it or not, I played hockey. Cuban playing hockey.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, what position did you play in hockey?
Well, since you have to play forward because my skating backwards wasn't that good. So usually you go out there and mostly it was an intramural league that I played. So and I think yeah, it was intramural leagues that we played because everybody had to play a sport in the school that I went to, and it was the oldest indoor rink in Quebec. It was built in the 19 something, so it was pretty amazing going there, and great people, and actually that's where I saw the U.S. Win the gold medal. That was back then. Was it '82 the Olympics?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 82 or 83 or something like, yeah, 82 I think was when the U.S. won the. So I was pretty much into hockey back then.
Oh, you're talking about the legendary Miracle team?
Yes, absolutely.
Of 1980, the Lake Placid games.
Yeah, I still remember it. That was pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's funny when I kind of look back at history and stuff. It's kind of interesting that was actually 3 years before my birth, and um, you know, I've always been a big historian, and so like when I hear about these little tidbits of your father being classmates with Neil Armstrong and everything, it just sets my heart on fire, because I just like I get so excited over things like that. And But I mean, there were a lot of famous alumni that kind of graced the halls of the same schools that you and your father did. I mean, everyone from Lou Piniella in baseball to, Dave Magadan to Al Lopez we talked about. And you had we assume it's either his grandson who is the quarterback when you were in school. Al Lopez, the baseball Hall of Famer, went to Tampa Jesuit, and so it's it's just crazy, like how small the world is. But years before, almost a decade before Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon, your father also participated in a very historical event. You've mentioned it already tonight, which was the Bay of Pigs.
Correct. He was in the Bay of Pigs invasion with Daniel Rodriguez, which is part of also the one of the tobacco growers that gave us the Corojo seed. So he was there with Daniel Rodriguez in the invasion, and then later my dad went after the failure of the Bay of Pigs invasion. He went into the army and did 2 years of tours in Korea. So my dad is also a U.S. veteran.
We certainly appreciate his service, and we're going to talk a little bit more about his service just in a second. I'm interested. Has he ever shared what that experience was like, the Bay of Pigs? I mean, I can't even begin to imagine the
for him,
tragedy that it was.
For him, it was very, very frustrating because believe it or not, at the beginning, most if you look at it, most people in revolutions are college kids. Those are the ones that want to change the world. You don't see older people with family and that being revolutionaries. And at the beginning, my dad was totally against Batista. It was part of the revolution. And then when they started having my grandmother march and put on uniforms and stuff like that, and him declaring himself a communist, that's where he said, hey, we supported the wrong idea. People get that really get sold an idea about freedom and everything is about socialism. And the other day they posted something about Mars used to be a socialist planet, and that's why there's no life anymore. So that's kind of what happens. It's they sell you a great idea of everything to be there, and that's what happened to with Cuba. Young people got enthusiastic because you had a dictator, and then ended up in an unfortunate situation.
Unbelievable. Just I I'm still to this day, that I learn about these stories that your father and his his compatriots and people of his time, we talk about Padron and Plasencia and all these other historic families that the hardship that they endured as they were, as they had to leave their homeland, not just their homeland, but their families from generations past, giving up everything that they had overly known and to kind of reestablish themselves. It's just, to me today, is still such a, it's such a heartbreaking tale, but at the same time, it's their perseverance is ultimately has led to our conversation today. It's the only reason why we're sitting across from each other right now and having this conversation is the perseverance of your father and the people of his time.
Yeah, and we're actually very close. We used to be neighbors with the Plasencia family, and Nestor's I think probably maybe 8 or 10 years younger than my dad, and my dad also helped him sponsor to come over to Honduras when and then he had his plane accident in '78, and and he's been a great success. Plasencia is also an iconic family in the industry today. They're like the Padron family and the Fuente family, and they're all we're all, believe it or not, we're all have history together and family. So it's a very unique small industry with a lot of great people in the industry.
Amen. You talked about your father's his military service, and served honorably in the United States military. Again, I'll echo what I said a moment ago. I do appreciate his service. As I've told you before, my father is a veteran.
I have service too, and again, that's a great honor.
I can't, and I sincerely mean this, Justo. I cannot begin to thank you for what you and your father have sacrificed for this country, along with every man and woman who's served in uniform. And this is something that I've taken very seriously. And as we kind of go into this next segment, I started this segment back on my birthday, which was to spotlight and highlight nonprofits and charities, of interest throughout this industry. And it doesn't have to necessarily be cigar related. We've had plenty of cigar related charities and everything, but we've I've taken an interest in other items and everything. And so I thought today would be a really good exercise in paying homage to the icon and titan that your father is. And so he served honorably in the United States military, as you did. And and so and I know that your father also has a love of horses along with tobacco. So I thought I found this incredible organization that I wanted to spotlight tonight, and it's called Battle Flag Ranch. And it's a nonprofit organization in Tennessee that's run by Jason Henry and his family. Jason is also a United States veteran. Served honorably in the United States Navy and the United States Army. And just a fantastic. I had a conversation with this man earlier today because I talked to him about how I was going to be featuring him on tonight's show, and we've never met. I just called him out of the blue, and I just said, "Hey, I wanted to let you know I wanted to do this," and because tobacco is one of those polarizing subjects, I didn't want to belittle what he was necessarily trying to accomplish. He's like, "Absolutely not. We smoke cigars all the time," and I was like, "Oh, perfect. This is great." So Battle Flag Ranch, Gusto, and I was talking to you a little bit about this again, is an incredible organization, and their mission is specifically centered around equine programs to provide respite and safe environment to battle weary veterans and their families in order to come away with the tools to re-engage with life. So since the war in Afghanistan began in 2001, divorce rates have really skyrocketed. We all know about something that I've spotlighted several times on the show. 22 veterans a day commit suicide. There is a huge problem with taking care of our veterans, especially with reentering life. And Jason and his family have done an incredible job with this program of Battle Flag Ranch, and they use equine as equine programs to rehab and get veterans to kind of re-enter society. It's a beautiful organization, and it's just absolutely wonderful. And 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 I know that one not necessarily doesn't relate to the other, Justo, but I mean, where did your father's love of horses start? Was it something from his childhood that he just grew up with, or was it something that developed later in his life?
Always loved riding horses. He used to like, the big Spaniard horses, Andaluces. He used to love riding horses. Actually, the day before he had his plane accident, he was, riding all day. He always remembers that day very clearly, and he always talks about riding horses and his love for horses. Actually, just send them, like 4 to 6 saddles that he bought. He wanted more saddles to go to the farm, so I sent him some saddles. And he's somebody that really enjoys horseback riding, like I do. And so it's something that that organization afterwards. If you send me a link, maybe we could help out in any way we can. And probably hopefully when I go to Tennessee, maybe even go visit them. So it'll be something real cool.
Yeah, I'm posting the link in the chat, and I'll certainly send it to you, Huso. And I greatly appreciate that. As I was talking to you before the show, and as my audience knows, I've pledged to donate a very small amount each week to these charities that are chosen and selected and spotlighted. And I thought this was just a great. This would be a great way to honor your father and his love of horses, and also the service that you and him both gave to this country. And
Well, I did not serve. I'm not a veteran. So
okay, excuse me.
no, I did not serve. My dad did, but I did not. No.
Well, as they're often fond of saying, is that when a family member serves, you serve also.
Yeah, well, I'm extremely proud of what he served. So, and everybody that has family members or that or know people that have served, you always have to respect them because that's something you do by vocation. There's way more sacrifice than rewards, except the personal reward that you get by doing something great for a country.
100%. 100%, absolutely. And I'm really excited to talk. Really excited to pay some close attention to this program. I'm a big supporter of Canines for Warriors, which kind of does something similar with dogs and with veterans. And the equine programs, I mean, are just really fantastic. And this one was actually recommended to me by a couple of people, and I could see why. They're It's a great organization that they've done some really great work, and it's veteran owned and operated, um, and it's just a truly fantastic organization. So thank you to your father for his service. Thank you to Jason for his service, and for all the men and women who served in the uniform for this great country that we love so dearly. It certainly means a lot to us, so thank you.
Thank you.
So kind of moving along to the last couple of questions here, Justo, for tonight. I thought it'd be really interesting to talk about a couple of other items here. You know, this past year has been incredibly difficult for obvious reasons with the whole worldwide pandemic and everything. We kind of alluded to it earlier with some of the efforts that your family had already done, and it just made it kind of not easy, but easier. And but your family's also helped out a lot of other companies as they were kind of trying to reopen and figure out their way in this new COVID world, so to speak. Is that right?
Well, there's a lot of information that best practices that we handle. We also had disinfection tunnels for our employees, and we provided informations on how other companies could use the same tunnels. So when people go into that, they'll get sprayed and be disinfected. Do hand washing themselves and stuff like that. So we provided information to other manufacturers to be able to do that. We also my dad and also my brother also helped out donating those tunnels and product to the hospital system in Danley. So the doctors and the patients that would go into the hospitals will also be able to take advantage of these disinfection tunnels.
It's unbelievable. Um so with news of the vaccine that was released earlier this year, that it kind of signaled the I guess the beginning of the end, we're all hoping, right?
Absolutely.
um and so with this kind of coming into effect now, and I know you've been on the road, and you've actually traveled to Honduras several times during this difficult time and everything, to keep operations going and keep the momentum that you've built so far. What are you looking forward to personally the most once things kind of return to normal? We're all hoping.
Well, I think that everybody wants, we're unfortunately for a lot of the northern states, but I think Texas also suffered a lot because of the cold weather. I mean, cold weather is probably one of and snow, and a lot of snow, probably it's one of the worst things that you get depressed. And then you also have the pandemic, and the kids not able to go to school. We're very lucky. I would say, kind of like you in Texas, that we kind of live probably more normal than most of our states. But I think as warmer weather gets closer, and also the vaccination also starts to advance in a more rapid way, I think we'll I'm looking to normalize things. I'm looking forward also to get the vaccine. We have to wait our turn, because of the age groups, and we have to give priority to the frontline people, and that's fair. That's only fair. But travel has been limited to what to a lot, because not everybody is taking into their stores the amount of people that they need to hang around in the lounges and smoke in the lounges. So there's a lot of curbside and limited amount of people that could go into a humidor. So you have to respect that, and the last thing you want to do is while people dealing in a pandemic, go and visit them and try to, spend time and you need to do it when it's right. So I don't know. I don't want to be a burden to a lot of people by traveling. And also, my wife is also worried too. Like I said, within the people that we know, and several people have passed away that that we have known, and you never know how this pandemic may affect somebody. It's a coin toss. Some might not feel anything and they'll be fine, but some other people do get really affected and get really sick.
No, it's absolutely true, and that kind of spearheads my next my next question, which is with the with this new year, TP has recently announced that they are moving forward with having their trade show coming up here in May, and then PCA, for all intents and purposes, is still on the books and scheduled to happen. What is JRE Tobacco's intention as far as the TPE show and also with the upcoming show at PCA? Is this something that, are y'all full steam ahead and going to be able to participate, or are you waiting and seeing? What's the decision there?
I think the proper thing to do is we need to wait to see what's happening. There's still a lot of restrictions going on, in many businesses and many locations in different states. And we also need to know, if we attend, if a lot of the stores are going to go, somehow or another, we need to kind of have a head count, see how successful a TPE or a, the in a way, the good thing about TPE, there is, they also do all their alternative products. I think they do, the vape and other stuff. So that show, it just not does not just depend on cigars, but to be, I don't know what restrictions are going to be imposed into when you go into the trade show, or if we're going to be having wearing masks, and if a lot of the store owners are going to travel, are they going to have the budgets to go? Because no matter what happens, there is still going to be an expense where many of these stores have been, hurt during the shutdowns. So we'll sit back and wait and probably speak to all the reps and probably try to get a head count to see how the trade shows are looking.
Yeah, I think that's an approach a lot of people are taking, and according to some officials, it's by the time the summer comes around, a lot more. I mean, more and more people are becoming vaccinated. It's a slower rollout than I think most people anticipated. I still know some frontline workers who have not been vaccinated and want to be. Right, there's that choice involved, and in some cases, it depends on your profession. I think they're requiring it in some professions. My parents, who are elderly, and have some actually health complications, are still not vaccinated, and they've registered as well. So it's you know it's definitely a wait and see, but every day gets better and better. Every day gets closer and closer, and the good news, Justo, is you're going to get vaccinated before me, because
Age. I rather wait and be younger, but that's
well,
that's up to me now.
I was gonna say you also travel as well, and for my primary work and job, I work from home, and I'm relatively young, and I'm in good health. So basically, I'm bottom of the list, I think, is where I'm gonna stand. But it'll come when it comes, and we're all looking forward to a return to normal. Um, the with the with this particular news, though, of specifically in the tobacco industry, the FDA uh, had a wonderful crushing defeat recently. Judge Amit Mehta had ruled down that the FDA regulations had not proved their point when it came to substantial equivalence and everything. So it certainly hasn't ended. The battle of the battle that we find ourselves in is certainly not over by any stretch of the imagination, but it has been stalled significantly by this recent decision. Now, the Eiroa family has sitting on a lot of predicate items, so there's a lot of that necessarily doesn't affect you, but with this kind of stay of the deeming regulations, has this kind of opened the door for you all to get a little bit more creative, um, in the creative process and potentially expand in ways that you know potentially weren't thinking about before?
Well, like you said, we have so many predicate products that we have still yet to come out with, and one of the things that we are with we leave nothing to chance. So anything that we need to request substantial equivalence, we're requesting it. I mean, I think all battles that are being fought, are very promising. But at the same time, you also got to have a plan B. So because a lot of these situations, a lot of the people that work in FDA, they're career guys, and a lot of them are anti-smoking, and they really have not understood how small our industry is. If you look at our population, this probably one cigar per person a year. If you were to divide the amount of premium cigars that we sell, and that's something that really somehow we need to be able to which I think they have done in a great way, explaining how and because FDA has not gotten their game together. I think they don't understand the cigar industry that well yet.
They certainly don't. But it's become an educational experience. I've spent a lot of time talking to movers and shakers on that front. CRA, PCA, of course, Director Pierce, and Joshua Berskia, who I had on the show a few weeks ago. We talked a great deal at length about that. So it certainly is promising, especially with what they were able to do this year. I think it was a very good year for the premium cigar industry when it comes to the legislative front, and we certainly won a major battle, but it's in no way, shape, or form over. Um, we talked about how JRE had launched in 2015. You guys took it over in 2016. So for all intents and purposes, it's one of the younger companies on the market today. We've already talked about you have a lot of predicate stuff, so a lot of this doesn't necessarily affect you, but it does in a lot of ways. I'm curious to get your opinion on this, Justo. Do you think we'll see a major launch of any new companies within this kind of time frame because of the door that's kind of been opened here, or do you think the industry, the way it looks right now, is probably going to be the way in terms of companies, the amount of companies? Do you think it's going to be about the same in the next 5 years, or do you think that we're going to see a resurgence of new companies?
I some it all depends, because a lot of companies are not vertically integrated, and they just they have somebody that manufactures and creates a blend for them, and they start marketing. So I don't really have a pulse on that. From our point of view, we want to stick to our core lines, and follow a very strict but very conservative path, and we would continue to do, because it's still a very challenging industry. It takes a lot of time and dedication to be able to be successful, and it's something that, and it's something that I in our case, we're going to be conservative about it, and you never know. There's a lot of people say, "Hey, can you manufacture something for me?" And I first try to talk them out, and then if they want to do something, then they'll do it. But I think starting from scratch is tough. Believe me, I've been feeling the pain for the last 4 or 5 years.
Well, certainly. Well, Justo, this is going to be my last question for the night, and but before I ask it, I always take this time to always thank my guest. I realize what an ask it is to come onto my show. Sunday nights are always family time. Uh, Even in the times of COVID, where we're spending more and more time at home, it's always the time to be spending with family. So for you to sacrifice a couple hours to sit down and have a conversation with me means such a great deal to me. So thank you so much for the privilege and the honor to speak with you tonight. It's been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Like I said, I've got one last question for you, but I just wanted to take the moment to really thank you for your time tonight.
Well, thank you, and your family time too. So don't worry about it. You're part of the family.
Well, I'm certainly honored. I appreciate that. So this is my curveball segment, Justo. This is meant to be just for fun. And I was thinking about some parts of our conversation that we were going to be having, and we were talking about. So this is kind of a two-part question, and like I said, it's just fun. We were talking a little bit about your the schools that your father and you attended, and there's some very famous alumni, as we talked about, astronauts, baseball players, and many, many more. But specifically, the baseball player and the baseball players and astronauts grabbed my attention. Alan Shepard also attended one of the schools that you guys attended. Charlie Duke, as we mentioned, and then of course famous Neil Armstrong, uh, with your was a high school classmate of your father's. The So it begs the question, Justo, would you, if in another life, if you had a choice between becoming a professional baseball player and an astronaut, which would you have become?
Probably astronaut. I think you write more history on that one.
Well, I figured you're going to say this because from my understanding, you're a big sci-fi fan. You're a big Star Trek fan, right?
Yeah, actually, yeah, absolutely. I'm really a sci-fi guy.
So how did you get into Star Trek? Was this something you, as a kid, that you just really liked, or
I always liked, I love Star Wars. When they first came out, I mean, Star Wars was probably something that blew everybody away. But Star Trek Captain Kirk was pretty cool. And then I'm actually watching. Is it Westgate right now? The one that is a virtual world of cowboys, which is
right?
yeah. So I just finished season one. So and the thing is, that you're sitting at home.
Westworld, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's, I'm watching right now, it's because you're spending so much time at home. That's, you got to find something to do, and you go nuts if you can't travel. So, you're catching up with a lot of this stuff, and you try to, find something that, at least gets your mind off of what's going on.
That's cool. I was hoping you could say astronaut. As much as I love baseball, the idea of being an astronaut is something that has always kind of just I've always kind of really gravitated towards. I love space history. I love I've watched the countless documentaries. I love the film. We talked a little bit about this before the show. I love the film Apollo 13. I thought Tom Hanks, Kevin Bacon, Gary Sinise, just great film. I really enjoyed it. It's just something I've always kind of gravitated towards. So in recent news, we landed another rover on Mars, right? And so it's the red planet. We're doing some studies on the soils and things like that. So it kind of begs the question. Um, as we mentioned, your father has more energy than most of us do, considering his age and the amount of time that he's been doing this. Do you think, given the opportunity, would the Eiroas jump at the chance to grow tobacco on Mars if it was deemed possible?
Huh. Well, we have to, I'm pretty sure, as long as you could be able to buy it back here, because it's probably going to be pretty expensive to get tobacco back here.
Right.
But for fun, yeah, I guess so. If we were to send the plants over there, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a pretty expensive cigar.
By the time it comes back, it's like $100,000 Corona. At this point, like,
You're lucky.
for luck, yeah. Someone would buy that stuff, though. I mean, there's a market for everything.
Absolutely.
Some crazy for absolutely. I'm gonna smoke the first cigar made from tobacco from Mars. I mean, that'd be awesome. Oh man, I mean, given your the family's proclivity for farming and everything, if anyone could develop products on the soils of Mars, I'm sure your family would be at the top of the list to be able to accomplish it for sure.
Well, I appreciate that.
Well, so that was my curveball segment, and this concludes our interview tonight. I just, again, I can't thank you enough. I had such a great time nerding out with you on some of these aspects and the incredible history that your family has given the industry, and it's just been a fantastic opportunity to sit down with you. And I can't thank you enough. So I appreciate that. I appreciate your time.
I thank you for the time and for the opportunity, and I want to wish everybody, a good night to everyone, and thank you for taking the time also to be with us, and I want to wish you, Bear, and your family the very best for 2021, and hopefully we'll get to see each other soon, and things are going to get really way better pretty soon. I think 2021 is going to be overall a good year.
Absolutely. And our good friend Will Cooper said that that drip irrigation system that you guys have would be quite pricey on Mars. So
Absolutely, yeah. So
good Coop to chime in there.
give somebody a cigar to smoke it up there, and that's probably a way better way to get some attention.
There you go. Absolutely. To our audience, I really appreciate everyone out there for joining us tonight. I appreciate all your likes, shares, and comments along the way. We ask if you are a fan of ELOSOFUMARTAKES, you continue to check out a list of upcoming guests on our Facebook page, ELOSOFUMAR. Amanda McAuliffe will be coming up in 2 weeks. Pete Johnson, Tatuaje Cigars, next week. Really excited to have those folks, and more guests will be coming out later on in the coming weeks. So check it out. You can always check out our YouTube page, ELOSOFUMAR, as well. And if you are a listener of our podcast, wherever you happen to listen to podcasts, whether that be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, or iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to podcasts, be sure you download, subscribe, review. And if you already are a subscriber, I ask that you do one thing. Please unsubscribe, but don't forget to resubscribe, because that actually really helps my number, so I can continue to invite incredible guests like the guest of honor this evening, Mr. Justo Eiroa. And we appreciate everyone out there. This is our 158th take, live from the Alec Bradley Lone Star Studios of Euless, Texas. I'm Bear Duplessis, as always. He's Justo Eiroa. And guess what, everyone? We'll see you next time.
Have a good night, guys. Thank you so much, Bear.